If you want to be caught up on the rebuttal witnesses in the Lindsay Clancy trial, day 19 just wrapped, and I will give you a recap because we had Dr. Mack continuing on the stand. I want to call him Dr. Quack because his answers to the defense team was awful. And we'll get into why. And then when it came to the Commonwealth, of course, he was just answering straightforward, seemed like a competent dude. Then we had a forensic psychologist, and he honestly, his evaluations and his testing that he did from Lindsay are very insightful into the type of person that Lindsay is, and even some nuggets that I have not heard about the incident and her before. And then at the end of the day, there was actually something that happened that Kevin Reddington was forced to ask for a mistrial, and I'll tell you what happened. Okay, so Dr. Mack, he gets on the stand again, and Kevin starts saying, all right, is it true that you testified in this case, in this case, in this case, and basically had violations for every one of them? And he denies or doesn't remember a lot of these cases. Then he goes into, okay, well, tell me the time that you went to go evaluate Lindsay, and you were with the other doctor who's about to testify today, that psychologist. And where did you meet up with him? Where did you stay? Did you stay in a hotel? And he was being so vague about who was staying with him. So I'm curious to know if maybe they had stayed together, some sort of ethical issues. But it is strange that both doctors went in to evaluate her at the same time when they aren't even working for the same firm. Just trust me when I say that he denied over and over again any sort of mania in Lindsay, any sort of bipolar, any sort of psychosis, and was still firm on the postpartum period being between 4 and 6 weeks. It even came to a point where Reddington was like, why are you laughing? This isn't funny. Or he'd say like, can you just tell me a yes or no answer? But the doctor refused to just say yes or no. He'd always be like, well, it depends, or that's not necessarily what I meant. And there was just no straightforward answer. So when he was done, he basically was like, I don't even care anymore. He said that out loud. I don't even care anymore. And then he just sat down. So then the Commonwealth came up. And basically, they just said things like, okay, well, you were instructed to analyze Lindsay from the documentation that you got, right? And you were just doing the best that you could in the time frame that you had, even though it was 2026. And he was just very much like, yes, no, yes. And even at one point, Kevin Reddington was like, he can answer like that to them, but he can't answer like that to me. Okay, then we had the next witness, which was Dr. Kirk, and he's the forensic psychologist, and I was honestly very impressed. He has been an expert witness in about 300 other court cases. He spent about 10 and a half hours evaluating Lindsay, as well as had an interview with her former husband, Patrick. So some of the newer nuggets that we've discovered were that Lindsay wasn't describing her hallucinations or that voice as like an auditory hallucination, because I guess an auditory hallucination is a voice that you hear outside of yourself. But she was saying that she actually heard this voice as if it was in her head and her own thoughts. So the psychologist, he diagnosed Lindsay with bipolar 2. So it's not as severe as just regular bipolar, but he said that the only holdup he had was that he didn't see any manic episodes in Lindsay. And another contributor to her diagnosis of this bipolar 2 was that the medication that she's on currently at the mental facility contributes to just what kind of a reaction that she has, which is more evidence that she indeed does have some sort of a bipolar. He also did a test, a type scale, and he had talked about how she wasn't malingering, so she wasn't being deceptive. She underreported things, which we had heard about before, and then she also was pretty high on the self-harming scale, and he said that a one-on-one at a mental hospital like that, it is not common to be on that kind of a watch for 3 years in a row. He talked about how Lindsay was really forgetful in the couple months up to the incident, and he said that she would be cooking something and then she would forget like what ingredients she had put in previously, and he said that's a very common symptom of depression. He said that there were 2 conclusions that he came up with, and that it was very hard because this is so out of character for Lindsay and the way that she parents, and just her demeanor. He said that she's a very bright woman. So he said there's two probabilities. The first one is acute psychosis, where she actually was in a psychotic state. However, he finds it very not common that she would hear the voice that she says is an unfamiliar male voice that wasn't her thoughts and that was outside of her body. It started and then it stopped within an 18-minute span, and she has not heard that voice before or since. He asked her if she had known that while she was doing it, it was wrong, and she said that her mind was blank. She didn't even think that, like she didn't even have that thought of like, oh, this is wrong, none of that. Now, the second option he says is more probable, which is probably why he's on the Commonwealth side. So he said, okay, well, there's a very high probability that it was just self-harming, wanting to take her kids as well, to where she intently knew that she wasn't going to be here anymore. He gave like a scenario where he was like, okay, if you knew that the Holocaust was going to come tomorrow, would you say, okay, I want to end my life? And then would you consider taking your kids with you so that they didn't have to suffer as well? He kind of put it in that perspective, to where he thinks that it's a very high probability that she knew and that she was out of control, because he did state that like there were a lot of things in her life that she felt like she couldn't control, and so this would be a way that she could control like the narrative and just the situation and her suffering, because she was clearly so sleep deprived and just like didn't feel happiness or any sort of emotion. Something new that I had learned is that she told him that when she woke up, she did not remember it right away, but that someone else had to inform her what had happened. Okay, and this is where the mistrial comes in, because this witness is talking about if Lindsay knew that it was like morally wrong, or, you know, that it was wrong by the law. And he said, well, I think Lindsay grew up Catholic, and so it was strange to me that she would think that she would be with her kids in heaven, because in the Catholic religion, you know, harming someone or hurting yourself is considered a moral sin. Is it moral or mortal? Please excuse my ignorance. But that's when Kevin immediately objected. There was a sidebar. The jury was dismissed, and Kevin had said, listen, I do not want to do this, but I need to put on the record that I would like a mistrial. Now, from what I've learned with law, if you don't at least ask for a mistrial when something goes awry like that, when it really is clear that like that is not right to do, that's morally not right, and you could get punished as like a lawyer for doing that. Because remember a few days ago when the Commonwealth had asked her mother-in-law the exact same thing. Now, Lindsay has been waiting for this for 3 years, and so has her lawyer, and I think it is going so well. So why would they want a mistrial when the Commonwealth can have a chance to correct their mistakes? But I know that they have to put it on paper that they asked for it, because if there ever becomes like a rebuttal trial, then they can say, no, like we did ask that, we did acknowledge it, and it's on the record. So the judge said, I think it is wildly inappropriate, but the witness said it and clearly got off track, because the question that was asked did not have anything to do with religion. So I'm going to bring the jury back in, and I'm going to tell them that that is absolutely not something that they should consider, and that it is inappropriate, and we will start again tomorrow.